Good morning. Our reading this morning is from 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 13. And if you're reading that from the church Bibles, that's on page 1217. 1217. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 13. Therefore, with minds that are alert and fully sober, set your hope on the grace to be brought to you when Jesus Christ is revealed at his coming.
Well, good morning, everybody. It is great to be with you. I feel like I've missed you. I've been away for the last few weeks. Our second little one arrived exactly 3 weeks ago, and so it's really exciting to be back. We were sneaking into the 3:45. So I said there's quite a lot of new people who've joined us even over the last few weeks. So if you have joined us in the last few weeks and you've missed me, I've missed you, do come and celebrate after the service. It'd be great. And over the last few weeks, we have been kind of just looking at a few verses to live by, if you like. I imagine them as verses to put on your fridge. The whole Bible is the Word of God and blesses us. But there's some verses that just, they encapsulate a lot. And they're really helpful to stick by your computer monitor or whatever it is, because they get at and they remind us of some of the really, really key truths of our faith, the kind of things we need to hear every single day. So we looked at Romans 1:8. There is now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. Such an amazing thing to be reminded each day. Last week we looked at Ephesians 2:10, reminding ourselves that God has a purpose for our lives, that each and every day he has prepared good works for us to do with him. And this week we are looking at 1 Peter 1:13. And actually I've just got it on the screen. You just have it up. We're just going to generally have it in the background because it's so short. But I'm going to read it again. Therefore, with minds that are alert and fully sober, set your hope on the grace to be brought to you when Jesus Christ is revealed at his coming. Let's pray before we have a look at this verse together. Lord, we thank you for the deep truths that are in your word and in this verse. We pray, Holy Spirit, you'd rest on all of us and speak to our hearts this morning. Amen. So hope is really, really important, isn't it? It is so important to have hope. The author Dostoevsky said, to live without hope is to cease to live. To live without hope is to cease to live. It might sound a bit overdramatic, but I think what he's getting at there is, if you really have no hope, you may be living, but it doesn't feel like it. We know that hope, it brings shape to life. It brings direction to life. It brings energy to life. And it gives us purpose, doesn't it? And yet, I think we are living in an age, maybe even a decade, we seem to have a hope deficit in society at the moment. And I don't think that's always been true. I think particularly at the moment, it feels to me like we are living with a hope deficit. And I think there are signs of it all around if you start looking. I think we can see it in our politics right now. I don't think it's actually that hard to see. I read a very interesting interview a couple of weeks ago in The Observer with a senior Labour Party aide. And the interviewer was asking why the Labour Party's kind of election campaign feels so flat, why it lacks any fizz. And the Labour Party guy was saying, well, the thing is, basically, the Tories are so out of it, the Labour are so far ahead in the polls right now, that the Labour's kind of campaign kind of strategy is just to avoid saying anything to mess it up. He called it trying to be a small target. The result is that they're just removing so many of the big and controversial things out of their campaign. And what he said was, it may be a winning strategy, but, and I quote him, the thing missing is hope. The missing ingredient is hope. And I think that's actually generally true as we look across politics. They don't know what to offer us or where to point us. I think you can see it also in our media as well. I will put my hands up and say that over the summer, I went to go and see the Barbie movie. And I have to say, it was phenomenal. It was hilarious. It was brilliant. It is the highest grossing film of 2023. And one should always go and see the highest grossing film of that particular year, because it tells you so much about where we're at as a culture. And I thought it was hilarious, but I also thought it was utterly bleak and depressing. If anyone's heard me talking about this recently, it must sound like I'm a broken record. The thing is, the film, it connects with so many problems. It seems to want to offer us some answers, and it just never gets there. So at the beginning of the film, we're kind of introduced to the pre-Barbie era. This is the era, we're told, when women could expect nothing more than being moms, and they had nothing to play with except for baby dolls. And that, we're told very explicitly at the beginning, that's very oppressive. And so from the beginning, that's set up. And then as we move into the film, we go into the era of classic Barbie, with the perfect body, and I'm an astronaut, and I'm a surgeon, and I'm a everything. But as we continue in the film, we discover that the main character, who it's all about, also finds that really oppressive, because how on earth could I live up to that? I mean, quite literally, you cannot have Barbie's body. So it's like, oh, this is oppressive. This doesn't work. And then as we go on, we're introduced to the post-Barbie era. It kind of comes in the form of the main character's daughter. And the thing is, she is this kind of grungy, angry teenager, and she just hates classic Barbie, and she's got real issues with it all, and she kind of can see all the problems, but to be honest, she's just depressed. And it's like, well, that's not the solution. So the film sets up this big thing. It's like, where are we going to go? And you kind of, what's the answer? Where are you taking us? And in the end, there's nothing. The film kind of ends by sort of saying, well, life is difficult, isn't it? And it's true, but the missing ingredient is hope. And it connects with so many of the issues. It really, really is on the button. It is so on the button with so many issues, but there's very little hope when you actually look for it. And I think these things are just indicative of a wider problem. It feels so often when we look around in the news, actually we can see so many of the problems so clearly, can't we? But actually, when we start asking, where are we looking for hope? Where are we looking for the solutions? We find the missing ingredient is hope. In the midst of all of this, it is amazing to have on your computer screen each day this verse which points us to the hope that we have. I'm going to read it again. Therefore, with minds that are alert and fully sober, set your hope on the grace to be brought to you when Jesus Christ is revealed at his coming. And this verse reminds me daily of a few really helpful things. I'm just going to go through them. The first thing it reminds me is this. Hope is hard work. Hope is actually often quite a lot of hard work. Peter says, with minds that are alert, set your hope. And that word alert, which is translated here for us in the NIV, it literally means, it's translating a kind of Hebrew phrase that means gird your loins. Now, that one means what he's actually saying. It's quite a sort of graphic image. Is gird the loins of your mind. Kind of trying to imagine that doesn't really work. But the idea is that kind of a sort of ancient Mediterranean man, if he wanted to be prepare for, having to travel quickly or go into battle or get down to some hard work in the field, he would have to start by wrapping up his long flowing robes so that they weren't in the way. It's kind of like, get everything out of the way, be prepared for some hard work. And so it just became like a general phrase for be prepared. Get ready for some hard work. If Peter was speaking to us today, I think he would say, roll up the sleeves of your mind. Get ready for some hard work. And we could just skip over that, but I think that's really, really helpful to realize, isn't it? I think sometimes we think that hope is just something you either have or you don't. Or maybe we think like, okay, but hope should at least be kind of natural and spontaneous. It should have just come naturally. But here we're being reminded by Peter that very often hope is something we have to work at. Very often it's something we have to choose. Very often it involves mental effort. And I don't think it's that hard to kind of think of examples of this. Very often in the face of a disaster or a major discouragement or something like that. I mean, you might be facing that right now. You might be in the midst of just everything flying at you. We have to choose to not panic, not despair, and choose hope. I remember when the pandemic began, so far away now, such a long time ago, isn't it? But I remember when the first few months of the pandemic, it was crazy. And most of the team here at HT were kind of spread out around the country in there trying to work out what it meant to be at home and work from home. Many of us had our own personal family issues going on, crises going on. Our then vicar was literally on life support in hospital. And in the midst of that, we had to try and work out how to reinvent church from scratch. And the temptation to despair was so big. But we had to choose not to give in to that, not just to say, let's just furlough everyone and just wait it out. But to go, okay, no, hold on. And we had to rally ourselves. We had to reorientate ourselves. We had to remind ourselves who God is. What does he want from us? We had to choose to engage in hope. I actually think hope is hard work, not just in the face of despair, but often it's hard work when we're really, really comfortable. There are other periods of our life when things are going really well. We seem to have hit a stride. We found that pattern of life where we're not entirely exhausted. It feels like, and actually at those points, it can be easy just to settle. But to choose to hope and lift our eyes up to the things God has for us, it can take hard work. So Peter says to us at the beginning, this is something we have to choose. Great to have a reminder each day. Am I going to choose hope? And that's the first thing this verse reminds me. The second thing I think Peter reminds us in this verse is that hope comes from clear thinking. Hope comes from clear thinking. Peter says, with minds that are alert and fully sober. Fully sober. Now, just over 4 weeks ago, about a month ago, 28th of August, I know the date, I was, in the evening, about to set out to go to the pub with some of my friends from my NCT group. And that's not an unusual occurrence. But the reason I know the date, and the reason why it was a bit odd, is because it was also the due date for our second little one, who has now arrived. Now, a few caveats before you judge me too harshly. First of all, there were absolutely no signs of number 2 arriving at that point, and I had the full blessing of my wife. So, nonetheless, as you can imagine, it was the whole evening was slightly, set on edge by this possibility of little one arriving. So, I made sure the pub was not too far away. I pumped up my tires so I could bomb it back on the bike if I needed to, kept my phone on loud, and surprise, surprise, I did not drink very much. Why? Because I had to be ready to think clearly. I had to be ready. I had to be able to drive. I had to be ready to make decisions. I had to be ready to deal with things as they come. You're just not going to drink too much. That's a stupid thing to do. I wanted to be clear-headed. And that is exactly what Peter is saying here. He says, with minds that are alert, prepared for action, but also fully sober. You could translate that just, clear-headed or think clearly. Again, this might seem like a small thing, but it's really, really helpful for us to connect with. What Peter is saying is, he thinks that Christian hope comes from engaging our brains. In my opinion, this might be a little bit controversial. I think there are lots of things that threaten our hope. Sometimes it is despair or discouragement, but some of the biggest challenges to true Christian hope in our lives is often a poor substitute, which is kind of like sentimental, fuzzy sentimentality. And you kind of see it everywhere in life, but there's a Christian version of it too. Now, one of the members of our team, Philly, sent me a picture of a poster that went up at her local park. You see this kind of thing all around you. The second line in particular, keep smiling in the awareness that everything is okay. Is it? I mean, I'd rather have that than give up now, it's all terrible. But only just. Because we see a lot of this, don't we? But actually we have it as Christians too. There are Christians versions of this where we kind of like throw away Instagram posts and kind of out of context quotes and trite things we say to each other, which are just, when you actually look at them, they don't really bear the weight of what they're trying to say. We can take that down because it's distracting. We're all trying to work out which park it is. And the thing is, there's actually, in one sense, there's little harm in these kinds of things. But on the other hand, the danger is that we end up swapping clear thinking and substantial hope that we have as Christians for something which isn't really based on the truth, and we all know will not actually get us through the darkest times in life. You don't actually bear up to the real challenges of life. And another danger, I think, is, there are plenty of people out there, people who are exploring faith or don't care about it, who they think that if you want to have Christian hope, you have to switch off your brain. They think the kind of hope we have is just shut your eyes and pretend it'll all be okay. But actually what Peter's saying is, no, actually, Christian hope is based on engaging our minds and thinking clearly. He's not just an optimist. Peter thinks that Christian hope is based on a clear-headed assessment of reality, of who we are in the light of who Jesus is, of what he's done for us, and what he has promised to do in the future. He says, think clearly. So just something practical maybe. Maybe some of us might find ourselves now or in the future battling for hope. Well, maybe one thing to say is, don't just take refuge in trying to numb the pain. Don't just take refuge in trying to kind of cover it with sentimentality. Maybe part of the answer might be to go, to re-look at the scriptures, maybe read a few books, listen to a few seminars, and fill our hearts and minds with the solid truths that will ultimately bring substantial hope. He says, be alert and be sober of mind. Think clearly. So what is it finally that we are being invited to think clearly about? And that's our final thing to think about. We are particularly being invited to think about our lives in light of the promised return of Jesus. That is what Peter really thinks our hope is based in. Set your hope on the grace to be brought to you when Jesus Christ is revealed at his coming. And I think the thing I'd like to communicate, and I think the thing that Peter is trying to communicate in his first chapter of 1 Peter, is really that in a quite deep and profound sense, if you are a Christian, if you have put your trust in Jesus, you cannot lose. You cannot ultimately lose. He's not saying that we can't lose things, or that we can't go through deep tragedies or deep suffering. Peter's actually really open about that. He talks a lot about suffering in his letter, about the real tragedy and loss that we can experience. But the thing he seems to want to say is you can't ultimately lose. If we have put our trust in Jesus, that which cannot be taken from us is far, far greater than that which can. That even when we do hit rock bottom, we find that there is a rock at the bottom. And it's a person. It is the resurrected Jesus, who he is now, but also what he has promised to do. He is coming back. It doesn't wipe away or cancel all those things we go through, all we lose, all we grieve, but it is a bottom line which cannot be crossed. It is a hope that cannot be taken away from us. So Peter says, think clearly about those things. Think clearly about the return of Jesus and his promise to return. Think about what it means. Just for a moment, I'm just going to pick out a few things that he even just mentions in this chapter. Think about what it means. It means that however much our bodies suffer and fail us, one day they will be renewed in glory when he raises us with him. It's not the end of the story for our bodies. They're not just on the wind down. They will be renewed in the resurrection. It means that however much we grieve, however much the pain of facing death is for ourselves or for others, there will be a day when we stand before our Father in heaven, when he renews us in life. It isn't just we get 70 years on this rock and that's it. There is eternal life ahead of us. It means that however much we may feel sidelined, mocked, derided, our dignity taken away from us, whether that's just through life or whether it's because of living for Jesus as a Christian, that as we're told a few verses earlier, we have praise, glory, and honor awaiting us when Jesus Christ is revealed. We live for his well done, and if nobody else in life says to you, well done, one day you will receive your praise from Jesus when he's revealed. It means however much material things that can be taken from us, or that we may choose to give generously, we have an inheritance that cannot perish, spoil, or fade. And it is 1,000 times more valuable. It sets us free from holding on to what we have. It means that however much people might let us down, however much the pain of a relationship's failing may be, at the end of the day, we have someone who will not let us down. Peter writes about how we don't see him now. We take great joy in the relationship still, even though we can't see him now. But one day we will see him face to face. And you know, it's not just him. He is building us as part of his eternal family. We will not be alone. We will have him and his family. And however broken this world may be, however unrelenting and unjust things around us may seem, we have a King of Kings who's coming back. And he will renew all things. Friends, in a world that's devoid of hope, in a world that doesn't really know which way things are going to go, this is absolutely extraordinary. Yesterday evening, I should have been sleeping, but instead I was watching the South Africa-Ireland game. So I'm South African, so it didn't go very well. And I have to say, it was the most stressful 80 minutes of the last 5 years. I've lost so many years off my life. And the reason was because from the first 30 seconds to the last, you didn't know who was going to win. Honestly, it was back and forth, back and forth. The game ended, South Africa a few points behind, having a line out on the 5-meter line. For goodness sake, what was the ref doing? It was so stressful because you never knew how it was going to end. The thing is, that's a small thing, but so many people around us are going through the whole of their lives like that. The whole of their lives. I'm working so hard at my career. I'm hoping to make it. I just actually don't know whether I will because the world is capricious. You know, I'm pouring myself into this relationship and I don't know whether it will last. It's the thing I love most. Will it? We look on a bigger scale, like the climate catastrophe. Are we going to solve this? Are we going to deal with this? Or are we not? And it's like so many people are going through the whole of their lives, like, which way is this going to go? And if you want to ask, why is there a rise in anxiety amongst younger generations? I'm sure there are many complex reasons, but I'm sure a backdrop to life like this certainly contributes. In the midst of that, we have so much hope. It's not that we ignore everything that's going on, but we know how this game ends. We know what's going to happen for us. That which can be taken away from us just cannot compare with that from that which cannot. We have so much hope. So Peter says, don't miss it. Don't swap it for superficial sentimentality. Prepare your minds for action. Think clearly. Take the time to think clearly and set your hope on the grace that will come to you when Jesus Christ is revealed in his coming. And the second thing he says later on in Peter, is tell people about this hope. Chapter 3, he says, that famous verse, always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you, to give the reason for the hope that you have. He doesn't say always be prepared to share the faith you have. He actually says always be prepared to give a reason for the hope that you have. Friends, we have so much hope. Let's set our minds on it and let's share it. Let me pray for us. Lord Jesus, some of us have followed you for so long that we've kind of just forgotten how utterly extraordinary the promises you've made to us are. Others of us, Lord, we're really in difficult times. We just feel lost in the mist. We need your hope. Lord, we thank you that when we get to the bottom of everything, you are there and you are a firm foundation for life. We ask for your help, Holy Spirit. Fill our hearts and our minds. Give us the discipline we need each day to choose to look at our lives in light of you. And give us courage to share this amazing, amazing, amazing gift that you have given us. Amen.